These pictures are real stories of tragedy and strange events that go beyond what they want us to know. Each one hides a truth you'll want to hear, and the last one might just surprise you the most.
In 1938. Photo, 1923.
In 1938, a 16-year-old girl named Alina Malihuar joined the Slovenian People's Liberation Movement. A teenager still in school, she chose to take up arms against Nazi forces occupying her homeland. By 17, she had already been wounded twice in battle. There is a photo of her during those years, eyes sharp, face hardened by war, yet still carrying the softness of youth. One image from 1941 shows the damaged hand of an X-ray technician in London. The skin is thick, cracked, and scarred from repeated exposure to radiation before protective gloves were standard. Back then, medical workers didn't fully understand how dangerous prolonged exposure was. Each day they handled X-ray plates barehanded, unknowingly sacrificing their own health to help others. On Ellis Island in 1904, a German immigrant couple stands with their 8 children, all dressed in worn but clean clothes. Their faces are tired yet hopeful. They had crossed the Atlantic in cramped steerage compartments for weeks, bringing everything they owned in small bundles. The children, unsure of what awaited them, cling close to their mother. There's a photo of August Landmesser in 1936, standing among a sea of men giving the Nazi salute. He stands still, arms folded, refusing to raise his hand. Landmesser was engaged to a Jewish woman, which made his act of defiance both dangerous and deeply personal. Years later, he would be forced into military service and vanish into the chaos of the war.
England, 1938. Reflecting fears of chemical warfare.
In 1938 in England, fears of chemical warfare led to strange inventions. One was a large airtight stroller meant to protect infants from gas attacks. A woman in a long coat pushes one of these bulky contraptions, the baby completely sealed inside. The sight is worrisome, like something from a science fiction nightmare, but it was real life for parents who feared the bombs might bring more than just shrapnels. In the Dust Bowl year of 1935, a photographer captured a wall of dust rolling over Texas farmland. The dark, suffocating cloud stretches across the horizon, blotting out the sun. Families would have to rush indoors, sealing windows with wet cloths just to breathe. These storms destroyed crops, starved cattle, and forced thousands to abandon their land. In 1945, Jewish prisoners were freed from a train bound for a concentration camp. The photograph shows them standing in the open air, some too weak to stand upright. Their faces are gaunt, their eyes sunken, yet a faint relief can be seen. For years, they had been treated as less than human. Now, even with nothing left, they had life again, something the Nazis could no longer take. The 1937 Hindenburg disaster is frozen in one iconic image, the airship engulfed in flames, falling from the sky. What's rarely mentioned is the smell of burning fabric and diesel that hung in the air long after. The airship had been filled with hydrogen, a cheaper but far more flammable choice than helium. Dozens died, and the dream of passenger airships died with them. In 1918, Seattle, a streetcar conductor stands at the open door, making sure every passenger is wearing a mask. It's the height of the Spanish flu pandemic. Back then, people didn't argue about mask mandates quietly. Those without one could be fined or even arrested. In 1936, a German coal miner is photographed after his shift, sitting shirtless with soot still clinging to his skin. He waits his turn in the communal showers, his muscles tense from hours underground. The air in the mines was thick with coal dust, and many miners would eventually develop lung diseases. There's a picture from the 1968 Soviet invasion of Prague that manages to capture an entire country's heartbreak. Tanks rumble down the streets, and in the foreground, a man stands still, watching. The photo had to be smuggled out of Czechoslovakia to reach the world. It's a frozen moment between resistance and silence, when a city realizes it has been crushed. In Tokyo, 1935, a noodle delivery man balances tall, swaying stacks of soba noodle boxes on his shoulder while riding a bicycle. The streets are narrow, crowded with pedestrians. This wasn't a staged image. Delivery workers genuinely transported food this way, trusting skill and balance over straps or fastenings. In 1951, during the Korean War, a South Korean soldier points his rifle at Chinese soldiers begging for their lives. Their hands are raised, their faces strained in fear. The snow on the ground adds a cold stillness to the scene. This moment shows how war strips away dignity, leaving only survival. A strange and scary scene from 1938 shows a man using a car's gas tank as a diving helmet while pearl diving in the Mississippi River. The tank, with a hose feeding air, sits over his head like a crude astronaut helmet. It was dangerous because there was no real safety mechanism, but in rural America, people often made do with what they had, even if it meant risking their lives for work. In 1958, a llama stood calmly in the middle of Times Square, New York City. It wasn't a circus act or parade, just an odd publicity stunt for a television show. The towering buildings, bright billboards, and streams of cars make the animal seem even more out of place. It's one of those photos that makes the city look like a dreamscape where anything can happen. In the Netherlands, 1888, two graves lie side by side, separated by a tall stone wall. One belongs to a Catholic woman, the other to her Protestant husband. Religious rules forbade them from being buried together, yet in death, they rest as close as they could. The image of the two tombstones reaching toward each other over the wall speaks louder than any love story. In 1902, child workers in Philadelphia went on strike. The photo shows them holding hand-painted signs, their small faces fierce and determined. They weren't asking for much, just shorter hours and safer working conditions. Many had already lost fingers or suffered lung damage in factories. The fact that children had to march for basic rights is what makes this photo so difficult to look at. The Woodstock Music Festival in August 1969 is often remembered for peace and love, but aerial photos tell another story. A massive crowd stretched across fields, mud everywhere from the rain, tents, and sleeping bags piled haphazardly. People waded through puddles, and yet the music kept going. That chaotic beauty is part of why the event became legendary. In 1933, an Italian inventor named Davideus Leggi tested his unusual one-wheel motorcycle. He sat inside the big wheel as it moved fast. The photo shows him riding, looking focused. Although it was an amazing invention, it was hard to steer and stop. Still, it's impressive that he tried something so unique. A black and white shot from 1928 shows women in Iceland washing laundry in steaming hot springs. The ground is bare rock, and the water bubbles up naturally warm from beneath. These springs were lifelines in cold weather, no fire needed, just nature's own boiling water. The steam curls around their figures like mist, giving the scene an almost ghostly beauty. In 1938, a Chinese female fighter named Chen Benhua stood before her captors, smiling moments before her execution. She was only 24 years old. She had been part of the resistance against Japanese occupation during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The smile on her face is what makes the picture unforgettable. It wasn't bravado for the camera, it was defiance. A photograph from 1922 takes us behind the scenes of the silent horror film Nosferatu. Actor Max Schreck in full vampire makeup is sitting casually between takes. The pointed ears, long fingers, and sharp teeth are there, but instead of stalking his victim, he's relaxing on a chair. The island of St. Kilda, far off the coast of Scotland, was home to people for centuries. In 1926, a photographer captured its residents going about their lives, unaware that just 4 years later, the entire island would be evacuated. Life there was hard, constant wind, rough seas, and little farmland. The photo feels quiet, but it's really the calm before a way of life vanished forever. In In 1918, Catherine Stinson became the first female pilot authorized to carry U.S. mail. There's a photo of her standing next to her plane in Calgary, wearing leather gloves and a determined expression. Airplanes then were open cockpit biplanes, loud and dangerous, and crashes were common. Stinson didn't just deliver letters, she carried proof that women could fly, as well as men in an age when many doubted it. In 1962, test pilot George Aird was ejected from his jet after a malfunction. A photographer happened to capture him mid-air, arms flailing, with the ground rushing toward him. He crashed into a greenhouse and broke both legs, but survived. The picture freezes him in that split second between disaster and survival, a moment most people never get to see. During the Great Depression in the 1930s, makeshift towns called Hoovervilles sprang up across America. In one 1936 photo, men gather in the mud, their clothes worn thin, the ground littered with scraps. They built homes out of cardboard, wood scraps, and anything else they could find. Life there was a mix of hunger, cold nights, and constant uncertainty. In 1949, the air over Pittsburgh was thick with black smoke from steel mills. From the hillside, rows of small houses can be seen overlooking the factories below. Residents lived with the constant smell of burning coal and a layer of soot settling on everything. This was the cost of industrial growth, a city covered in smoke, even in daylight. A 1914 photograph shows men dangling from the cables of the Brooklyn Bridge, painting its massive steel structure. They work without safety harnesses, relying on balance and grip to keep from falling. The drop beneath them is enough to make your stomach turn just looking at the picture. Back then, workplace safety meant trusting your own hands. In 1953, during Queen Elizabeth II's coronation celebrations, a young girl in England sits alone at a party table. She's wearing a paper crown, but her chair is set apart from the others. The reason was because it was the year of a polio outbreak, and she was keeping her distance to avoid getting sick. In 1936, a lemonade and soda seller worked the streets of Naples, Italy. His cart is worn but bright, and his hands are busy mixing drinks for passers-by. It's a simple street scene, but behind it is the story of a country still recovering from war and poverty, where street vendors were often the heart of a neighborhood. A photo from 1967 in Sweden shows the first morning after the country switched from driving on the left side of the road to the right. Cars are frozen mid-change, traffic looking almost chaotic. For months before, the government had run huge campaigns to prepare people. Even so, that morning was tense. One wrong move and disaster could happen in seconds. In 1888, the Eiffel Tower was still under construction. Workers in flat caps and vests can be seen standing on the huge iron beams, far above the ground. They moved across the skeleton of the tower with ease, hammering and riveting in place. Paris didn't yet know that this strange-looking structure would one day become its most famous landmark. A 1940s photograph shows a worker carefully carving the face of one of the presidents on Mount Rushmore. He's hanging in a harness, a drill in his hands, with the rock falling away in chunks below him. The scale is almost impossible to grasp until you realize he's working on just one small section of an enormous face. Which of these photos stayed in your mind the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video.